Thelma, directed by Josh Margolin, stars June Squibb, Fred Hechinger, and Malcolm McDowell. When 93-year-old Thelma Post gets duped by a phone scammer pretending to be her grandson, she sets out on a treacherous quest across the city to reclaim what was taken from her. I had only really heard of this movie from seeing a trailer for it by chance a little while ago when I was viewing some other movie. Along with that, I heard discussion about the movie as it did rounds at film festivals, and the reactions there seemed to be generally positive, which gave me more intrigue into checking it out. I'll start with talking about what I thought about the performances in this movie. Right off the bat, I think June Squibb is such a gem. She really is just this hidden little national treasure that obviously has been around for a long time and has done tons of different roles, but I feel like this movie is really going to make audiences turn their heads at her as she brings such a great deal to this performance. She has a lot to work with, essentially being the main character of the movie and leading it, but at the center she really is the heart of this movie too, which I'll explore more in depth later in this review. I think that's shown more through the different relationships she has with the different characters in the movie. Specifically, I thought the dynamic between her and her grandson was really great. It's just this sweet, wholesome bond that they have throughout the movie. You can tell from how they work off each other that they really care for each other equally, and it was always really nice to see. The same goes for the second dynamic she has with the character of Ben, played by Richard Roundtree. The two of them doing a good job at portraying what feels like this lifelong friendship and the hardships that go with it. They give them a nice buddy dynamic where he will go along with the things she's doing, but at the same time knows they're questionable at best, which makes for some really good humorous moments between the two. It really has a way of pulling you into caring about her character. You see this situation happening to her and you've naturally nothing but sympathy for her. She's great at giving those moments that lean into that sympathetic angle while also easily balancing the side of her that's more humorous as she's overly determined to get what she wants, and it's great to see. Fred Hechinger was good here as well. His performance was a lot different than I expected it to be. As it starts, he's a guy who has such an affinity for his grandma. He always wants the best for her, and it's really nice to see, and like I said before, the dynamic between him and Thelma is really sweet whenever the two are on screen. As the film goes on, we begin to learn more about his character, and while it's not explicitly said in the movie, there's a high chance his character may be someone suffering from learning difficulties. While I wouldn't know what those struggles are like myself, I thought he did a good job at conveying this aspect of his character. It felt like he was trying to be three different generations of people all at once. It sometimes felt like a child in a man's body, or even ironically enough, an old person in a young man's body, and they explore how he isn't that much different than his own grandmother. Despite him being like this, he did a great job at acting like this guy who I think a lot of people could easily relate to and sympathize with. Richard Roundtree did a great job in his role too. He brings a lot of good humor to his part, and honestly in the whole film he easily became one of my favorite characters in this. He really shines when he gets paired up with Thelma, and the two of them have such great chemistry as they go on this journey together, despite half the time he shows and says that he doesn't want to, and is more doing it begrudgingly. Him being able to balance this felt really realistic to how lifelong friends like this would act, so I appreciated that aspect of not only his but both of their characters. I honestly can't say much about Malcolm McDowell in this, but that's not a testament to his acting in the slightest. It's mainly more so down to the fact that he's only really in the end of this movie. He becomes much more prevalent in the third act, and when he arrives to the movie he isn't given too much to do. He has a little moment where he gets to show off his chops at being menacing, as well as balancing some good humor into his role too. There were a few moments where he had some light chuckles out of me. Honestly, I was surprised to see him in this, as I had no idea he was going to be in it, but I guess he's at this stage in his career where he can just be in whatever movie he wants, and I respect that. The humor in this movie was done decently. There were some pretty well written jokes, and some of them managed to get heightened by the actors' deliveries of these lines. I initially thought this movie was going to be more outrageous based on the concept of the movie alone. However, this isn't one of those movies that is based in escalation humor where lots of scenes get crazier as they go on, which walking into this movie is more so what I was expecting. Instead, we get some good moments of pretty well done humor. What this movie does really well though is having this strong emotional core to it. At the heart of this movie naturally is June Squibb herself. She really is, like I said, such a gem in this movie, and the heart comes from how her character and other elderly characters are written in this movie. It feels like a genuine and real portrayal, which is something I feel like other movies would choose to shy away from, so I appreciated this movie for actually giving us something real. There are a lot of sweet moments that will dare to tug on your heartstrings, and I think when these moments are present in the movie they work really well and are done effectively. This movie is shot pretty well too. There's a lot of really good looking composition going on. There's especially some really nice looking lighting here too, which I know is something I tend to compliment a lot on this channel. When every other second movie looks like a TV show, seeing attention and care put into composing good-looking shadows and contrast within different parts of the movie was always really nice to see. It's a really nice looking movie. There's nothing overly spectacular going on with the cinematography, but at the same time there's some really great framing going on for the majority of it, and it's always cool to see. I think one of the main things I didn't like was the two parents in this movie. However, that isn't a complaint directed at the actors themselves. Their performances aren't bad, and neither is their acting. I think genuinely the writing in this movie is handled so well that they managed to write in such easily dislikable and annoying characters into this. While the two of them do provide some more comic relief to the movie, I did find them to be pretty grating. They were able to pull off the overbearing parents angle really well to a pretty realistic extent, which was interesting. Overall, I had a pretty good time with this film. I do appreciate how unique it felt. It took a spin on a trope we've seen before. I mean, hell, the concept of an old person getting scammed out of their money was literally one of the plot points in a very early movie from this year, the Jason Statham epic The Beekeeper. But this film puts its own thing into these tropes, which makes for a pretty fun time. I'm giving Thelma 4 stars. It's an incredibly sweet, funny, charming, endearing, and really fun original movie that will keep you completely engaged from start to finish with its infectiously lovely performances, specifically from June Squibb, along with presenting modern audiences with something new. I definitely encourage people to seek this film out while it's still in cinemas, as I feel like this will be one of those movies that will have a limited release, since that's how they treat movies like this nowadays. I mean, hell, at the time of me recording this day next week, Deadpool and Wolverine comes out, and I know that movie for a fact is just gonna stay in theaters for like 3 months after it gets released, because that's just how Hollywood treats big IP movies next to original movies nowadays. But hopefully word of mouth will get people checking it out whenever it's being screened near them, as this is certainly worth your time and money to be seen on the big screen. I really liked this movie and I can't recommend it enough.